look at that as all of those events that go together. So your professional activities program or professional events program would be the 6 or 8 professional events that you hold in a given year as a chapter. Same thing with community service. And then your portfolio is your overall chapter CMP submission. So that includes your projects, your events, right? Your programs, all of your community service events together, all of your professional events together, but it also includes other work. It includes your officer reports. It includes your meeting minutes. All of those things come together to be your chapter CMP submission for the year. And that's your portfolio of work that proves that you've accomplished that goal of being an accredited chapter or a chapter of recognition or a chapter of excellence. Couple other definitions. You'll hear me use the word task. A task is an activity that needs to be accomplished within a defined period of time or by a deadline to work towards project goals. So again, you see that it's time bound. Time is a big deal in projects, and it has to work towards project goals. So it's not just something that we check a box with, but it's something that actually has a defined impact on our ability to succeed as a project. And then a deliverable is that unique and verifiable product, result, or capability that must be produced to complete a project phase or process. So for example, a deliverable of your elections as a chapter would be your officer report that you populate to the hub. So some other deliverables that we see in Delta Sigma Pi, an alumni newsletter. So your VPAR puts out an alumni newsletter. The pounds of pop tabs that come out of your Ronald McDonald House community service event. Your meeting minutes are a deliverable for your VPCO. Scholarship applications are deliverable for your VPSA. And new brothers, believe it or not, are a deliverable for your senior vice president. And they're an example of the deliverable that they achieve when completing recruitment successfully as a project. So then the last definition that I'll share tonight is stakeholders. Stakeholders are individuals and organizations who are actively involved in the project or, very important, or whose interests may be positively or negatively affected as a result of project execution or successful project completion. So in the fraternity, we typically think of our stakeholders as our chapter members. But while those are our internal stakeholders to a collegiate chapter or an alumni chapter, the reality is we have a lot of external stakeholders that we also need to take into consideration. So we have our chapter, but then some stakeholders that all of us need to take into consideration as we work on our chapter operations are our colleges or universities, the fraternity as a whole, the alumni, not just of our chapter, but of the fraternity in the area, and then the parents or the community that we are serving as well. So all of those groups are our stakeholders, and we need to make sure that we're considering them in all of our planning. Any questions on the definitions thus far? All right. So we're going to jump right in and talk about how a project begins. So typically, projects begin with a charter. A charter is a document that really outlines the problem, issue, or goal that a project looks to solve or achieve. It identifies the metrics for success and their required deliverables. It tells us typically what a high-level budget, schedule, or a scope estimate might be. And it identifies how the project aligns with the company's strategic plan. That last one's really important. Any project that a company undertakes is going to take resources, whether that be time or talent. And because it's going to take those resources, there's an opportunity cost to that project. So every project that you undertake should align with a company's strategic plan. And if you don't know how the project aligns with a strategic plan, or your team doesn't know, you should pause and address that prior to moving forward and taking company resources. Similarly, within a chapter, we create strategic plans on the chapter level that really are the charters for our officers as they go through their semester or their year of service. So we create strategic plans each semester. Each officer is responsible for creating them and submitting them in the hub. And those strategic plans ask you to outline your goals. They ask you to outline the events that you are going to provide, which are your required deliverables. The hub doesn't, I don't believe, ask you for that budget, but it does ask you for an ideal schedule. And then it, you know, it, by the reality of how it operates, aligns with our strategic plan as a fraternity. Okay, so again, what we call a charter in the business world is very similar to what we use as strategic plans for our officers within our chapters. And we're going to do some work on strategic plans later tonight. So the next principle that I wanted to share with you from a project management perspective is the iron triangle. So the iron triangle is something that we as project managers keep in our minds all the time. It is scope, cost, and time. So each side of the triangle has to touch, and they're constrained by the others. So if you think about a triangle, right? If I need to shorten the time, okay, of this on this project, if I need to make this shorter, then either my cost has to become higher, or my scope has to be decreased for this to remain a triangle. Okay. So each side is constrained by the others. If I need to shorten my project, it's going to cost me more, or I'm going to need to decrease scope. If I need my project to cost less, then I need to either crunch my schedule, crash my schedule, or I need to remove things from scope. You know, and so the three sides all work together. If I have scope creep, if there's things that I want to add to scope that weren't there before, I'm going to impact my cost and or my schedule as well. So scope is what you're going to accomplish. Simple as that. What is that set of deliverables that you're responsible for? Cost is any resources. So that can be money. That can also be physical space. It can be people for the project or event. And then time is the schedule, the date by which your project is supposed to be complete. So we talked about that budget, right? That cost, and that cost includes people. We don't like to think of people as resources, but they are. At the end of the day, I am a resource for my company. I'm a resource for my brothers. I'm a resource for my family. And there's only one of me. So, and there's only so much time in a day. So managing my resources effectively makes me a stronger project manager. To do that, there's a couple of key questions that I ask myself, and I encourage you to ask these questions as you are operating your chapter. What skills does the project or event, in our case, require? What skills do my team members want to develop? Where can team members get experience in my project? And where do I need proven leaders? So the reason I ask these questions is really twofold. The first is that if I understand the skills that the project requires, and I understand the skills that my team has, then I can match them up. And I mentioned before that oftentimes, in fact, in my entire career, I don't have HR responsibilities for any of my team members, but I have to motivate them to get the work done. And the way that I have been successful, and the way that we teach project managers to be successful in doing that, is by getting to know the individuals on our team and then helping them help themselves. So I have a project right now where my technical lead has never been a technical lead before. And this project was supposed to be for him to kind of cut his teeth and get comfortable. The project's a little out of control. And so, you know, this is a development opportunity for him, and it's shifted to be a larger development opportunity. That means that I'm going to give him a little more time. I'm going to give him some more attention. I'm going to make sure that our technical owner gives him additional support because I want him to be successful. By me doing that, he doesn't get as frustrated in his role, and we're able to make the project successful. So the same thing happens in our chapters. in that we have chapter members or committee members who want to develop specific skills or have specific desires within the fraternity. Maybe they want to be in the officer position that you're in next semester, or maybe they want to achieve another officer position, or maybe they want, to just be the best brother that they can be. Working with them and understanding from their perspective, what do you want to do? What do you want to contribute? What are you passionate about? What type of internship are you looking to get? And then matching that up with the needs of your events or your projects or the work that you need to do for the chapter in that semester is going to give you a recipe for success to be able to put that puzzle together effectively. As far as where you need proven leaders, that can be a sticky point in a chapter. And like I just mentioned, I have someone who I really need a proven leader in that spot right now, but he's assigned to it and it's not going to be taken away from him, right? Because even though the project is going sideways and it has a different scope than folks thought when he was assigned to the project, he is my tech lead. And so as a president of a chapter, you don't get to choose your entire executive committee. You're in the same position, right? As an officer in the chapter, you don't get to choose all of your committee members. They come to you. And so you need to be able to look at where you need proven leaders and to match people up. But at the same time, if you end up with someone in a role who isn't a proven leader, you are responsible for stepping in and helping that person, mentoring them, getting them connected with someone who's done the job before, connecting them to somebody in another chapter who's done that and that they can learn from, etc. So mentioned in my role that one of the things I do is remove those roadblocks and mitigate those risks. And you as leaders in your chapter need to be looking for those as well, especially around resource management. If you do this right, you will have engaged brothers who really care about the fraternity and are ready for their next step, whatever that might be, fraternally or professionally. But this is where chapters get in trouble. And this is where we disengage brothers, is that we take it all on ourselves and we don't think through how to utilize the resources that we have. And we chose them because they are phenomenal individuals and they have something to give to the fraternity. So this is an area to watch for. And we'll do a case study on this in a little bit. All right, so project manager. I told you that one of the main responsibilities was to plan, right? So we'll talk a little bit about planning. Planning is really the first point in a project. As long as your charter connects to your strategic goals, planning is really the next place where you can make or break the success of your project very, very quickly. If you fail to plan, you will plan to fail. And many of the goals that exist, particularly in professional project management, just can't be accomplished without detailed planning. And detailed planning is quite stressful sometimes because not everyone knows everything, right? Like oftentimes in my projects, we are creating custom systems or we're creating brand new workflows, and helping an organization go through a transformational change in a project means that you're asking them to imagine something that they've never seen, they've never done, right? We often hear that difficult phrase, we've always done it this way. Well, in project management, nobody's ever done it this way. That's the excitement of it. And you're trying to help people think about what the future could look like and what those workflows could be, or what that product could be when nobody's ever seen it before. And so the same thing can be true within the chapter. You're looking to bring in the biggest speaker that you've ever had, or you're looking to have a brand new event that you've never done before. You might miss a few things in your planning. That's okay. But you want to make sure that you get 90 or 95% of it up front, because you can deal with the 5 or the 10%. But if you've only got 50% of it up front, your project or your event might flop because you just don't have enough meat on the bone before you get going. And then that iron triangle that we talked about, that schedule or that budget or your scope gets hit as a result, right? And so to be successful, we want to do as much detailed planning as we can. We want to ask the right questions, and then we'll deal with the surprises that come. So from a project management perspective in the professional world, I build detailed plans with my teams around development, testing plans, cutover plans, go live plans, transition to support plans, and project closure. Um, all of those plans roll up into my project plan. And in a chapter, you should have a plan for recruitment, for your pledge program, for fundraising, for chapter communications or organization communications, your professional events, your community service events, alumni engagement, awards applications, initiation, your Rose Ball. All of those things should have plans to them. And those all roll up into really an overall plan for the chapter that your president is responsible for helping you execute. And you'll notice that each of these could easily be assigned or is easily assigned to a specific officer. And so those officers are really responsible for creating a detailed plan around each of those areas. So when you as an officer are creating that detailed plan, I encourage you to start with your why and come back to it. So what is the purpose or the goal of your event, of your project, of your task? Going back to that why and going back to that purpose really helps you avoid scope creep. And if you remember, again, going back to our iron triangle, if scope creeps, then we're going to have an issue with our time or with our resources. Once we, really keep our mind on the why, then we're going to break down the work that's required to do to accomplish that why. You're going to break this down into tasks that can be assigned. You're going to want to note dependencies. That means something that is dependent on another task. So let's say that let's say that I want my son to stop crying and take his bottle. There's a dependency that I warm up the water before I just give him and put the bottle in the water before I just give him the bottle. Okay, so silly little example, but if I don't warm up the water, then my tasks are out of order, right? I can pull the bottle out of the refrigerator, but the reality is it's not going to be ready any faster because I need to warm up the water. So that also leads me to understanding the critical path, right? So the fastest way or the things that have to go in order to be able to accomplish your end deliverable or your end goal. So I have to warm up the water and that takes 3 minutes. And then I need to set the bottle in the water and that takes 2.5 minutes. And then I can give him the bottle. If I pull the bottle out of the fridge and I set it on the counter before I start warming up the water, I'm adding time to my my process. So anyway, simple example of dependencies and critical path there. So you'll see here we have an example commonly used in PMI around a yard project and how you could break down the work that's required, right? So we need to do cleanup before and after. We need to cut our lawn. We need to trim the edges. We have equipment that we need to maintain and we need to trim the hedges. So you'll see that under each of those tasks, there are subtasks. So cutting the lawn, you can split that into mowing the front lawn, mowing the back lawn. Trimming, you can split that into weeds at the trees and then the edging of the sidewalk, etc. So what might that look like in Delta Sig? Well, it might look like a Meet the Chapter event, and you can break that down into the tasks of planning the event itself, as well as like the physical event and then the marketing of the event. And so for marketing, you might need to create a flyer to put up around campus, and you might want to have a social media plan. For the event itself, you might want to make sure that you have food, as well as a physical space to hold the event. Obviously, this is a pre-COVID or post-COVID example. Under food, you're going to need to order the food and pick up the food. And for the room, you need to reserve the room, set up the room, and clean up the room. So again, a simple example, but you kind of get the idea. You can break down the work that you need to do. And the beautiful thing about each of these work packages, which is what we call this bottom row, is they can be handed to someone else. They can be delegated to someone. You can utilize those resources and engage those brothers so that they feel ownership over the event. So when it comes to planning, One thing that I like to remember as a PM is really to see the forest and the trees. As a PM, we have to be able to be detail oriented, but we also have to keep our eye on the prize and the big picture, how it all goes together. So meet the chapter is what you're trying to do, but at the same, and you need to be excited about that and understand the impact of that. But you also need to make sure that the details, the individual trees, get accomplished. So I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions before we jump into some additional topics.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So I know you said you're talking about soft and hard skills and like how leadership is very important. So how would you define leadership, and then like what ways can people lead from, I guess, the unexpected way or the expected way?
Sure. So first, to define leadership. So as a project manager, I really ascribe to the idea of servant leadership. I mentioned that I don't get to choose my team, right? So as a leader, it's up to me to get to know my team. And that's one of the first things that you can do as a leader, no matter where you are in the chapter, is make sure that you get to know your brothers on a personal level. And kind of know their motivations and know their goals, invest in them. And then, I am responsible for removing those roadblocks. So I want to make sure that as a leader, I've uh, listened to their goals and put them in a position where they can be successful. If my team is successful personally, professionally, and on the project, then I am successful. If the project is incredibly successful, but they were stagnant in their career, then I shouldn't be seen as successful because I didn't accomplish that piece of my responsibility. So as a leader within the chapter, you can make sure that you're opening gates for other people, right? So if a brother is really interested in becoming senior vice president, then whether or not you're senior vice president, you should encourage them to be on the recruitment committee. You should encourage them to maybe own or be the event chair for one of the recruitment week events or recruitment season events. You might, if you know the senior vice president really well, you might say, hey, Adam's really interested in learning how to do your job. Like, I know you don't know him really well, but he and I grabbed coffee and we were talking about his goals in the fraternity. And I think he'd be a great fit for you to mentor and help him learn what you do in this role, right? And so those are all just little ways that you can move people forward, being that connector. And so leadership really is about investing in other people, understanding where they want to go, and then helping them remove the roadblocks and find opportunities to accomplish those goals. And in doing that, you end up succeeding as well because you make those connections and you can help each other. It's kind of what goes around comes around. So again, as in terms of leading from a non-traditional space in the chapter, I would say that some of the best leaders I know in Delta Sig were never chapter officers. They were the general member who showed up to everything, who knew everyone, who connected people. They were outstanding. And they're still my example of an ideal brother. There are also brothers who have served in grand officer positions, brothers who have served in chapter elected positions, who are phenomenal in their own right, in that they owned that position, they owned the responsibility, but they delegated and they utilized their brothers and they gave them opportunities that they didn't have to give. Like, you can sit there as an officer and do all of the work. You might burn yourself out, but you can do it. And if that's how you define success as a leader, is getting the program done, okay. But I challenge you to find success in those leadership roles as someone who engages everybody else in the process and encourages their ideas and promotes their ideas and moves them forward. So, did that answer your question, Adam?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Thank you
You're
very much.
welcome.
I had a quick question. Do you
Yeah.
have any recommendations for like resources or tools that people can use to begin to maybe like create their own project charters and process mapping? Like where's a good starting point besides just a piece of paper and a pen or a whiteboard?
Yeah. So PMI, Project Management Institute, has some great free opportunities. We are going to look at some templates that I have for strategic planning a little bit later in the session. And those templates are built for Delta Sig for each of the officers. You're welcome to use those as a starting point. Speaking of which, if anyone wants a copy of the templates, I have meeting minutes, I have event planning, and I have strategic planning for each of the officer positions, the 10 national officer positions. Feel free to throw your email in the chat and I'll grab that and make sure that you get a copy of the toolkit that I created for this session. But yeah, so those are a great place to start. And there's like, if you literally Google work breakdown structure template, you'll get a million hits of how you can start to break down work in a project plan.
Noel, when, as a district director, right, I assume you've had your chapters use these templates. Okay, do you see market improvements?
Yeah,
What?
so
Okay.
so the biggest thing about using the template is the accountability to publish them to the chapter. So it's one thing to write down goals, right? Like, does everybody do New Year's resolutions? I totally do New Year's resolutions. We all write down goals, right? But when you share them with someone else who can help you stay accountable, you end up being significantly more successful. So yes, I've seen market improvement, and one of the chapters that I worked with in New York, like I won't put them out there because yeah, but you know, they continue to use the templates, and they're one of the strongest chapters in the Northeast, and I absolutely adore them. They're always doing great things, and I couldn't be more proud of them. So yes.
And, you know, I'm just curious, do you have any of them, you know, who've used these templates, you know, once they get into the workforce, come back to you and say, oh, like the best thing I've ever done, you know, because it really helped prepare them for the future?
Yeah, you know, I think the biggest thing is that ability to think strategically. I have had a couple of them come back actually after serving as grand officers in the fraternity and say like, I can't believe how much better I am at goal setting and at tracking and like measuring myself and my success because I practiced this as a collegiate, right? So definitely a good tool to get you on the right foot.
So I did have one other, I want to ask a question regarding the triangle. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I thought it was interesting about the time scope, you know, the time, the scope, as well as the other costs. So do you ever find that people will, like, once you have everything established, then they want to pile on? Oh
yeah.
Let's do this.
Yes.
I see a few shaking heads. So like, it's so easy to do.
Yep. And then that's what we talk about, right? And as a PM, I think one of the best things I can do with my teams is be transparent. And so all of my teams know where my budget stands on a weekly basis. They all know where our schedule stands on a weekly basis. And they know how many hours we're behind. They know how many dollars we're in the black because while it's my responsibility, all of us collectively make the project successful. And so I really drive that information home through transparency. So if somebody wants to gold plate a project, they want to add scope because we have money, then there's a conversation of like, well, remember, that's an opportunity cost. So what else would that money potentially go towards? Like this scope was approved for this project by our corporate leadership team because it was this scope at this budget. And yeah, technically that money is in the checkbook, so to speak, for us to spend, but gold plating a project doesn't get us anywhere. doesn't do right by the business. It's not integrity for the business. Because again, that opportunity cost. And if you're trying to increase the scope or pile on or shorten my timeline without changing those other things, then it's a conversation of, okay, did we really get the estimates right then? Right. And we talk about improving that estimating as well. But most of the time, if you want to add scope, the answer is just no, because we don't have the budget for it.
Now, like for the people who want to pile on, then once they find out, wow, there's an additional cost, then at some point, do they back off like 9 times out of 10?
9 times out of 10. And in projects, there is the ability typically to go to change control. And what that means is you go back to your corporate leadership team and say, hey, they want to add this scope. The business expects it or the customer expects it to have this sort of positive impact on our bottom line. Do you want to approve this? Like, it's essentially a mini project that you roll into your project, but it has to get approved before you can just put it in your project. At that point, you re-baseline everything. But hopefully our chapters aren't re-baselining things on a regular basis. Great questions, guys. All right, so communication. I just talked about transparency, so I kind of gave you a little bit of a head start on this slide. But communication is really, as a project manager, it boils down to who needs to know what out of my stakeholders, when do they need to know it, and from whom. So sometimes I, as the project manager, am the person who should address that. 90% of the time, I'm the person who should be communicating. But 10% of the time, there's somebody else who really the information should come from. So certain decisions, I want those to come from the leadership team. I want them to come from my project sponsors. They shouldn't come from me. At my very first job, one of our vice president at the time, he would say, if you aren't the person who can say yes, you don't get to say no. And so oftentimes on a project, I'm the person who can say yes, but when I get to the point where I can't say yes on a question, and I want to say no, I still make sure that with my sponsors and my owners that we're in alignment before we communicate that. When it comes to communication, we have to meet stakeholders where they're at. So what that means is when I present to my CIO, I present different information at a different level of detail than when I present to a team member, or than when I present to a frontline employee. And so, or a frontline end user of the product that I'm working to create. And so meeting stakeholders where they're at and tailoring your message, it's the same idea as tailoring your resume. It truly is. You're trying to use the verbiage and the nomenclature that they are comfortable with, so that they can get the message out that you are trying to convey. And what should that message be? Typically in a project, that message is going to be around your project progress, the next steps in your project, and whatever their role is in that next step. So your stakeholders, depending on, like if I'm talking to my sponsor, I'm going to tell them, hey, this is at a high level what progress we've made. These are the next steps. And then if I have an issue or a risk that I need their intervention on or their approval on, the mitigation plan, then I'm going to go over that and say, your role is to approve this, and that's how, and this is what it's going to affect in the time, the budget, the scope. And so those three kind of big buckets are really where communication goes. That communication pattern can easily be used when we talk about alumni newsletters. It can easily be used when we talk about officer reports for chapter meetings, right? Those are all methods of communication. You want to talk about what you've done. You want to talk about what you're going to do, and then you want to talk about how people can help you, how brothers can help you, how your fellow coworkers can help you, etc. And then over communication. So sometimes people are like, oh, I've heard this 3 times. Well, in the work world, when you've got 40 plus hours in a week and there's a lot of information coming at you, adults don't learn things until we've heard them 3 to 7 times. So it's okay to over communicate. I say things in team meeting, I send out my meeting minutes, and if it's a time sensitive thing that I need the team's action on, I will send a reminder to say, hey, this is due today, don't forget. The reality is that expectations equal reality. If my sponsor, my customer, or a team member thinks that something is going to happen and I haven't communicated clearly that it's not going to happen, and then it doesn't happen, my stakeholder, whoever that is, will be uncomfortable, right? And that's going to create friction, and that's going to create drama for the project. So I want to get ahead of that by making sure that, if we're going to miss a deadline, I'm not saying that 5 minutes before we miss the deadline. I'm communicating like, this is at risk. If this doesn't happen by this date, we are going to miss this deadline. This is how it impacts the project. If you don't give me this by this date, I will not be able to achieve X, Y, and Z for you, right? Setting those expectations and being very clear in them helps me shape the reality that I live in and that my stakeholders are in. If I don't communicate, then I have that expectation and my stakeholders can be on a different page. And then finally, document. So I have the joy of coming in the middle of this project that has gone sideways, right? And one of the unfortunate realities of this project is that it has had multiple PMs be responsible for it. And there are only so many documents and not enough of them, which means that, we lose information. The same thing happens in a chapter. So you might have a phenomenal idea for an event and you do all this work to start getting it in place. And then you're going to go study abroad next semester and the event is scheduled for next semester. And you say, okay, congratulations, you're the new person. Here's my officer transition packet. See ya. Well, if you didn't document all of that fabulous work you did, if you didn't make it clear to the chapter that all of that work was done, then that work might get dropped. And you might have a speaker that you lined up who now, has a bad taste in their mouth about your organization. You might have, a contract that you signed. Like I've had chapters where they signed a contract for a Rose Ball and the contract didn't get copied into the right materials. And so the next person didn't know they signed the contract and they ended up in 2 contracts and things like that. So making sure that you document and that documentation travels appropriately is really important. Couple of fun facts here. Meeting stakeholders where they're at means to also meet your brothers where they're at. Alumni are typically on Facebook at this point. They are not typically on Instagram. I mean, I am, but I've graduated in the last decade. So, and even for my fabulous brothers who are on here who are on Instagram and are in older generations or other generations, make sure that you're meeting everybody where they're at. So just a funny there, but your professors, right? If you want to invite your professors to an appreciation, you email them or you stop by their office and make sure that they know they're invited. Treat your alumni and your other stakeholders the same way. Make sure that you find where they are and then communicate with them in the manner that they are most comfortable with. It's good practice. You will have to do this in the business world, I promise. And then from a documentation perspective, our equivalent of the requirements documents and all of the project planning and documents that I work with on a day in and day out, our equivalent in Delta Sig would be your meeting minutes, your Slack convos, your emails, all of those things that communicate to your team members, your chapter, what is expected and what's coming forward. All right, so communication, a lot of communication happens in meetings. So let's take a minute and talk about meeting management. There are 5 types of meetings that I typically run in a week. There are stand-ups. These are super short, sweet, time-sensitive updates, looking for like, hey, are work packages moving forward? Are there any issues or risks that I need to address for you? No? Okay, great. See you tomorrow. Stand-ups, short, sweet, typically 15 to 30 minutes. Work group meetings are focused on work packages or planning of work packages. So this might be just my technical team and we might be working through a technical issue. It might not even be me. It might just be my technical team and they're going to report back to me as to what happened. But those meetings are going to be very focused on a specific topic or plan. Leadership, those are my sponsor meetings, my ownership meetings. In those meetings, I'm really focused on discussing the risks and the issues and creating a mitigation for those. So, or getting their approval for a mitigation. Sponsor meetings, those are going to be my big ticket items. So if I have a change request that's coming from a vendor, or if we found out that there's a major piece of scope missing, and without it, the product isn't viable, right? Those items are going to go there, and they're going to be escalations. I am not going to talk with them about the individual work packages that are being done, right? I'm going to be looking at more the milestones that are being completed. And then my team. So my team, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a transparent PM. We talk about where we're at from budget perspective, quality perspective, scope perspective, schedule perspective, any risks or issues that are coming forward. I ask them for risks and issues. The worst thing that can happen to you as a PM is you get surprised by a risk or an issue that your team members knew about, right? So you want to keep that transparency going both ways. I encourage and applaud people bringing risks and issues forward. A risk and an issue isn't something to be upset about. It's something to mitigate, right? I would rather know about it so that we can mitigate it than not know about it and have the customer, be impacted or our project hit a stone wall. So a couple of just rundown of different meetings there for you. So what's the equivalent? What's the equivalent in Delta Sig, and how should we utilize our meetings in Delta Sig? Well, our equivalent, we don't really have an equivalent for stand-up, so I skipped that one, but our work group meetings are our committee meetings. So when you are meeting with the Brotherhood Committee or the fundraising committee, you are focused on a specific event for that particular meeting, or you're focused on a specific part of the work that needs to be done. Your executive committee, that's your leadership meeting, right? That's your leadership meeting. Your chapter advisor and your DD. So when I have a sponsor meeting, I always have a business sponsor in the room and I have an IT sponsor in the room. And if it's just a business project, like a transformation project, I may have just one sponsor, but typically there's a couple of sponsors in the room. And your chapter advisor and your DD are those people within the fraternity, right? Your chapter advisor is representing the college and university, and quite frankly, the surrounding community when you talk about your external stakeholders. And your DD is representing your alumni and central office and the fraternity as a whole when you talk about, again, your external stakeholders. And so having those people in the know and escalating to them as you need, that's going to help them champion for you and help make your chapter stronger. My sponsors are some of my absolute favorite people. Like, I invest heavily in those relationships, and I make sure that I know, their kids' names, I know who they are, that I know what their background is in the organization, and that I really treat them and their assistants very well. Like, I will move a calendar invite for a sponsor in a heartbeat if they ask me to. Those people can be your biggest champions for your career, and your chapter advisor and your DD are exactly the equivalent in Delta Sigma Pi. And then your team is really your chapter. So that chapter meeting should have that same level of transparency that you would want in a project team meeting. You want to be able, as a leader, as any officers in the chapter, you want to be able to share information, but then as chapter members, you also want to be able to bring forward any risks or issues. You want to be able to be transparent, and you're responsible for that. Like, my team, if we miss a milestone, yeah, I'm accountable at the end of the day, and I'll take that. But my team has access to that milestone document. We track it every single meeting. And if I don't have time to bring it forward one week, they say, like, hey, can you put this in the team chat so we can all be aware of where we're at? Yep, absolutely. We didn't get to it on the team agenda, but here's where we're at. It's on the team page so that you're aware. As a chapter member, you should be leading in that same way within your chapter. You should know where your chapter's at in CMP. You should know where you're at in terms of any expectations that your college and university has for you for the year or for the semester. So make sure that you're speaking up and bringing those issues and risks forward. All right, I'm going to pause before we go into process improvement. What questions do you have? Okay, this is the last one before we get to case studies. So a couple items under process improvement. First and foremost, don't recreate the wheel. You know, it can be really exciting to say, I did this and it was the first time that we did this. Awesome. But you're always standing on the shoulders of someone else, right? I started a chapter. Like, there legitimately wasn't a Delta Sigma Pi chapter at Albion, but I didn't recreate the wheel. I called central office. Dale sent me a great packet to get us started. We talked to existing chapters and in our region and said, hey, what do you do for this? What do you do for that? We went to LEAD. We took ideas from other chapters from LEAD and from GCC, and then we implemented them, right? And we still started our chapter, but there was no need to recreate the wheel. There was no need to go truly to square one. Always be improving. So one of the things that sometimes frustrates people about project managers is we can always see the room for improvement, right? So if someone says, hey, wasn't that an amazing game? I'll be like, yeah, well, it was amazing. They won by a bunch of points, but you know, Aaron Rodgers could have thrown a little bit better in this play and in this play. And people are like, but it was such a good game. Like, no, it was a good game, but I'm a project manager. I see the room for improvement, right? Encourage that in your chapter. Feedback has gotten a bad rap in the last couple of decades, but the reality is looking for that improvement in yourself, in your chapter, in your events. That's what makes you stronger. That's what makes you competitive in business. And so it's okay to always be improving and to be looking for that feedback. The way to ask for that feedback, and the way that we do it in project management, is we do retrospectives. So these are really just an opportunity to talk about lessons learned. I like to do retros at the end of each phase of my project. If my project is longer than 6 months, I'll break it up into phases. But I encourage you to do retros after every event. And then at the end of a semester, you should do, as a full chapter, take time to do an exercise called start, stop, continue. And ask everybody in your chapter, what's one thing you want us to start, one thing you want us to stop, and one thing you want us to continue. Have everybody write it down on a sticky note, and then go up and stick it on the wall in those, under those categories: start, stop, continue. You can do this with whiteboard or Google Docs. Over Zoom as well. So you don't have to wait till after COVID to start doing this. But it's good to have everybody write it down first. And I do this with my teams. I make everybody write things down or everybody type things out before I let them share them, because if you just share them, you can get into groupthink, right? But I get so much good feedback, and like, we have processes that we update as a company. I have practices that I change personally because I get feedback from my teams on a regular basis, and it makes me stronger. It makes my company stronger. It makes us as a whole better. So retros are a big key to success. And then documentation. So you should be documenting on an event planning form or on another form what you did for your event, who the main contacts were, all those sorts of stuff, so that you can transfer that on. And then that's the transition, right? So when I finish a project, I can be called on about that project for the rest of the time that I'm at that company. So I document everything. I close my project. I transition it to business or to the customer. And then I exist as a resource. Not that they're going to pull on me often, but if they need to understand why something was done, I encourage them to look at the documentation, and if it's not there, they're going to call me. So if I don't hear from my customer after a go live, that's the best mark of success, that I did my transition correctly. All right, so we're going to jump into case studies. Any questions or items for discussion before we do that?
Yeah, I had a quick question about like planning. I
Yeah.
know we're going back a little bit, but I was thinking about like time and time frames. How do you recommend planning a project in terms of time? Do you plan like in order of priority or by deadline, or does it sort of depend on the project?
It definitely depends on the project. So some projects that I end up with are time bound by the nature of the project. So we have something at Land's End right now where one of our international locations, we have to change how some of the web build works because it's required by that country that we're doing business in, right? So and it's required by a certain date. So when you get projects that have legal constraints, you end up having to adjust your schedule or your date for that. What that ends up meaning is that on that iron triangle, my schedule can't change, right, at all. And so as a result, the only two things that I have from a mitigation or a change perspective are my budget and my scope. And sometimes your scope is dictated by legal requirement as well. So anyway, it does matter on that. But when I look at planning for a chapter, I try to look at my program, right? So whatever officer position I'm in, I look at my program as a whole, and then I break it down, thinking about the dependencies within that program, right? I don't want all 4 of my professional events to be in April. I want them to be spaced out. For me, for my sanity, for my committee's sanity, for the chapter's sanity, I want those to be spaced out. So I might put those as 1, 2, 3, 4. I might have 2 here. I might have 1 in each of the other 2 months. I might skip the entire month of February because we got lead. Don't know. You can decide that, but I'll time box things at that level. And then as you build those work packages and you get down into more detailed planning, that'll tell you how you need to time box as well. So you saw on the WBS example that I used where it said like mowing the front lawn 30 minutes, right? My project plans tend to be less at the minute level and more at the days or weeks level. But, I know that I have to have the catering order for an event next fall. I know that I have to have the catering order for that event in 7 days before, right? So that means that my RSVPs I want due 14 days before. And so some of that gets to be backed up as I look at my dependencies as well. Does that help, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Sorry, Noel, I want to ask you a question as well. So one of the things, and this is probably more from a chapter point of view, right? But a lot of times, when it comes to documentation, one of the things I've always encouraged people is, like, for example, they might need to they have to talk to someone at a specific office, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have them sort of not just put the person's name, but also the title and whatever. And the reason being, because people could be transferred to new roles.
Yes.
So, you don't want to, okay, I'm just curious if you had, make sure you included that information. Yeah,
no, that's a great call out. Yes, so I will often include like that Emma Klauscher is the trainer, right? Or she's the owner of the organization that I'm contracting with. It's possible that the vice president of sales that I make the contract with may not be there in 3 months, that there's a new vice president of sales. But knowing that I talked with Johnny J and he was the vice president of sales, when Johnny J is gone, I can still go to the new vice president of sales and say, hey, I talked to your predecessor. This is what we talked about. I'd like to pick up this conversation and move forward, right? Good call out.
The other question I have for you is a combination of the CMP. Do you recommend that chapters show that every meeting, just so people know, the whole chapter knows where they are?
Yeah. Yes. So as far as I'm concerned, at every single team meeting, my leads on a project give a brief report. Doesn't have to be much, but it is where they're at, right? The idea of saying no comment or nothing to report, unless you're on vacation for the last week, that doesn't fly. And so again, as brothers, one of the things that we take an oath to do is to perpetuate the fraternity and to ever have in mind the well-being of our brothers. To me, as a leader, ever having in mind the well-being of my brothers means that I hold them accountable, just as I hold myself accountable. If you don't hold your brothers accountable while they're in school, if I'm not held accountable when I was in school, I wouldn't be as successful as I am in my career. So you do that in an appropriate manner, right? We want to make sure that we're being, that we're using emotional intelligence when we're giving that feedback, but your officers should be giving you a true update at every meeting. Your VPCO, part of their update should be, are you on track, or is there something that you're off track with from a CMP perspective? And it's okay that their report is everything's on track for CMP. We are on track to meet our goal of excellence, recognition, accreditation, whatever your chapter's goal is. But it's not okay for them to say nothing to report. Their minutes are also part of their report, so to speak. So, good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Your chancellor should even have something to report up until initiation is done. So, your chancellor gets a pass maybe like half the semester, but the rest of the time they should have something to report because they're responsible for prepping your initiation. I get that question a lot. All right, so we are not going to use breakout rooms, but I would love to hear from our collegiates on the line what your goal is for the next semester, how you think that your goal relates to your chapter or the overall fraternity goals, and then 1 or 2 deliverables of your goal. So just putting kind of our process here, putting some of these terms to use. So any brave souls that want to go first? I don't bite. Okay, some people are looking away. Some people are smiling. Some people don't have their video on.
I can go.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess I'll do like to my specific position. So I'm the VPPA and I just took over this role. So I'm really looking for like a new goal for the semester. So the previous vice president of professional activities was very heavily focused on like the accounting and finance departments of companies. And that was a really big problem for our chapter because we're like 75% marketing majors. So I'm going to try and really broaden the avenues of people that we bring into the chapter to speak so that it's not just focused on like my current major. And then so how the goal relates to the fraternity is that like you said, like I want the well-being of my brothers in mind. And if 75% of the chapter is marketing, I'm not going to bring in like 7 accounting firms that wouldn't really like have their best interest in mind. And then some deliverables of this goal, I guess, would just to be set a certain number of companies to bring in, like say like 4 marketing firms or consulting firms for our professional activities. And then my committee can help me like reach out to those companies and hold me accountable to those goals that I set.
Awesome. You put a whole bunch of the presentation together there. Awesome job. Thank you, Abby. I have some names for you. So feel free to hit me up. I can connect you with some marketing bros.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Who else wants to share?
I guess I can.
Awesome.
So my goals for next semester is well, I'm actually vice president of Brotherhood, and that position actually just combined with VP of Scholarship and Awards and Alumni Relations. So like one of the biggest like hurdles is like obviously with COVID and how to implement like social activities, also still being like a social chair of, you know, like engagement, like keeping up engagement, like having events, like make sure like brothers are still having fun while still being professional at the same time. And then I guess this also relates to like the chapter and the fraternity as a whole, because like, I guess COVID affects everybody, and, you know, everybody kind of does things differently. And, you know, some people, I know some chapters still meet, like some chapters are entirely on Zoom, and, you know, it's just like depletes overall morale of brothers when they can't engage with other brothers when there is these barriers and limitations in the way. And I guess my best job is trying to like get rid of those obstacles.
Awesome. So some deliverables might be some like really well attended social events, virtual social events that brothers, you know, give strong feedback for, right?
Right. Like deliverables would be more like, I guess, even online, or even if we did anything in person, we would have to make sure we follow like all guidelines. But even like, instead of, you know, things in the past being like big parties, which obviously nobody can has anymore, it would have to be like multiple smaller events, and just like combine like different people in the chapter who normally don't see each other, and then try to like mix and marry different people.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I would love to maybe we should just throw this out on the, I don't know, not a ton of collegiates are on the Facebook page anymore, but you know, I have some chapters who have done a phenomenal job in terms of social breakout rooms. Like they just put everybody in a breakout room for 15 minutes at the end of their chapter meeting or at the beginning of their chapter meeting, and they play on Kahoot. Like one person in the breakout room is responsible to get the game going, and then they play on Kahoot or they do Scribble, and it's funny, and we all sit there and talk with each other. And as DD, it's been a great way to get to know different brothers in the chapter, and you know yeah. So I encourage you to talk with other chapters and see what they've done, because it sucks, right? COVID sucks that we're all separated and we can't physically gather. But at least there's some ways for us to kind of chew the fat and have some fun and learn that our brothers can't draw together as well. So yeah, awesome. I love your goals, Adam. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah, I can go. I am an incoming senior vice president. So when I thought about, my overall goal for next semester, I would say really focusing on having a successful virtual recruitment, but I really still want to connect and engage with potential new members, because we'll have some who are in the dorms, some who are at home. So I want to make sure that we connect with everyone. So in terms of my goal aligning with my chapter and like our goals overall, I know that we really focus on embracing diversity, and we really, really pride ourselves on being authentic. So I feel like that would align very well. And we consider ourselves to be a very supportive family of one another. So I really want to focus on showcasing that next semester in recruitment. So deliverables, I never really thought about creating a charter. I really love that. I feel like that'd be a cool way to connect with like VP of marketing, alumni, people who I work with. I really would love to do a panel with like a mentor and a mentee, to kind of show to people who are at home, like, hey, if you join Delta Sig, you get a mentor, someone who's looking out for you from day one. And then the last thing would really be like plan and communicate very well with VP of marketing for like testimonials on Instagram, or like having people show, their house on campus if they're living with D-SIGs, to just make it more personable, even if everything was remote. So those are some of the things that I put together.
That's fabulous. Awesome. Okay, well, I am gonna pull up I'm gonna pull up the template. This is the senior vice president template, but Adam, I got you covered too, because senior vice president, for the chapter that I originally created these for, also was responsible for brotherhood. So if there's a brotherhood chair separate, you can separate these out. These are very basic kind of charters, right? They're strategic plans. They're based off of what you need to put in the hub, but it has a space for you to populate your goals for the semester. And then anything that you're responsible for within the standard CMP program is talked about. So if it's for recognition, it's got 1 star. If it's for excellence, it's got 2 stars, but otherwise it doesn't have any stars because it's accredited. So your pledging ceremony, the senior vice president is responsible for that with the vice president of Pledge Ed. So what's your date? Make sure that you get your report in. Any recruiting events that you're going to have, right?
Noel, are you wanting to share this?
Yes. Is it not sharing?
I'm still seeing your strategic plan PowerPoint.
Oh, no. All right. Let me try this. Thanks, Dad. Can everybody see now?
Yep.
Okay. All right, good call. So your goals for the semester, your pledging ceremony date, and then at a very high level, right? Like we're not into our detailed planning yet, but at a high level, what do you expect your recruiting events to look like? So Alexa, this would be where you could put in, right? Like mentee mentor panel, and the potential time, right? Just time of day. And you'll notice that it doesn't call for a specific date here, but you could populate that if you wanted to. And then at the bottom, it just asks you to think about, right, like what's your total projected cost if folks were to attend everything? What's the number of events that are off campus? Some of us have campuses where being off campus isn't a big deal. For others, being off campus is a struggle, just due to cars and whatnot. And then you as the officer sign this, and you give a copy to your president so that they can help you be successful, right? Because the president's job is to help you be successful and make sure that your strategic plan, your charter as an officer rolls up and supports the overall chapter expectations. So any questions about these templates? I'm not going to go through each one for every officer, but I will send them to everybody who puts their email in the chat. I will send all 10, and you guys can share them as you wish. Okay, Alexa, Adam, do you guys have any initial feedback? These look like something that would be helpful for you.
Yeah, I actually had a question, and I don't know if it can be answered now or if this is something I just more bring up to like nationals and in general, but I know when I was speaking with like our previous SVP, when it came to project management, we did a lot of like note taking on Google Forms. Like I know a lot of times when you meet, you know, potential members, and you're not supposed to have access to those forms until you go to voting, but we have not been able to find a platform that makes the system work easily. Like our secretary had to organize forms for close to 15 hours in Excel to like individualize it by brother, transfer it to their own sheet, and then have it be sent out the morning of voting. So I don't know if you'd have an answer now, but if you know of any platforms that like we could maybe pay for or utilize for, I don't know, I'm sure I'm not the only SVP with this problem because we're so used to being in person and having it on paper, because then you just collect it all for the night, bring it home, and then bring it back. So I've been like brainstorming, but that's maybe just something like I could email you about, or if anyone on the call knows something past SVPs used this past semester, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely email me, and we'll see what we can do. I don't have anything off the top of my head, but drop me an email. We'll check it out.
If I'm not mistaken, I think they had like 175 recruits, possible recruits that never, so that's why it took.
Yeah, she had like 1,500 responses that she had to go through individually.
So even, yeah, I mean, so like most people would kill to have that many anytime.
Yeah, no kidding.
COVID, okay? So, you know, I think that tells you about their brand on their campus.
Yeah, that's outstanding.
Yeah, that's you know, that's one of those things. It's a really good problem to have. It's a really bad problem to have, but yeah.
Just tough to manage. So I will email you, but if anyone ends up thinking of something or knows other big schools like OSU that they have system in place, that would be great for me to know.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna pop back over to the PowerPoint now that I know that I have to share them individually. Okay, so we did our strategic plan. Let's talk about events. All right, so this is just a little planning exercise, right? So an event that you want to lead in the future, the resources you will need to be successful, and what are a couple of work packages that you could potentially delegate, opportunities for growth for somebody on your committee, or opportunities, you know, just for somebody who's a rock star in a particular area. And alumni, if you have an event that you want to lead in the future, you can jump in too.
Well,
anybody?
I'll tell you what we're working on right now. Actually, we are going to have a series of 4 professional activities in the spring. Obviously virtual. The theme of them, the activities are going, it's Welcome to Adulting, the mini series.
Nice.
So 4 different areas of adulting, and we're going to give you real experiences, real information. So what will we need? Well, first of all, we'll need some presenters, and obviously a schedule. And we're hoping to have that all finalized by our time frame for that is the end of December. We'll have everything ready to roll. Honestly, I'm waiting for the national fraternity to roll out there so we don't have a issue with scheduling. So what will I need? I'll need some marketing. And then I will also need James Kuhn. I will need Zoom, okay, access to the Zoom account.
Yep.
So, and the other thing though I am doing, I have been in touch with every VPPA in the region, okay, with the exception of Noah, only because I've spoken to him earlier, and he's on the call. So what we're going to be doing is for these resources for marketing, okay, as far as connecting with other chapters in our region, we're asking every chapter to help us co-sponsor the event, some of our events.
Awesome.
Right.
I love it.
So it's the ultimate at killing several birds with one stone.
Yeah, that's fabulous. You guys are very fortunate to have such an active alumni chapter in your area. That's great. All right, well, I am gonna just share quickly. There is an event planning form, and guys, again, like feedback is gold coins, right? So if you find something as you use these forms and you're like, Noel, this needs to be updated, dude, give it to me. Let's update it. But this is our event planning form, very basic, right? Event title, date, evaluation date. That's important. The date that you do a retrospective, it matters. Your co-sponsors, if any, your officer who was responsible, the officer title who was responsible, as well as their name, the event chair and co-chair, purpose of your event. So in one sentence, like what's your elevator speech of why you did it, any partner or speaker contact information, your cost breakdown, and then here's your retro, guys. Your retro is built right in. It's a simple 1-pager. 3 things that went well. Like, what are 3 things that you would absolutely want to do again? 3 areas for improvement. So things that you would like to start, right? So these are your continue, these are your start, and then these are your stop, things we shouldn't do again, right? Like maybe it's, hey, it was at the wrong time, or it was during Greek week and that was really silly because half the campus is involved in Greek life, right? Whatever it might be. Your event stats, your start time, end time, the amount of time it took you to clean up, your brothers, students, and faculty in attendance. This makes it really easy for Hub for the future. And then your officer signature and your chair, right? Again, like, guys, give folks in your chapter an opportunity to be chairs of each of these events. As an officer, I was never a chair of one of my events. I wanted to make sure that I delegated that and gave that leadership opportunity to folks to get that experience before they were the officer themselves. All right, any questions on this form? Look like it would be helpful? Awesome. Okay. We only have a couple minutes left, so I want to respect everybody's time. We're going to do a quick poll in the chat. So meeting minutes, right? We talk about documentation as project managers. These are 3 examples from real meeting minutes. So which one do you think is correct? Is A, how things should be documented? Is B, how things should be documented? Or is C, how things should be documented? Just pop it in the chat. A, B, or C, how should it be documented? All right, so we got a lot of A's. Man, you guys are really smart in this region. Okay. That is correct. A is correct. So if you look at any of our grand chapter minutes, those are always a good example, right? So if the national fraternity is taking minutes in a specific manner, it's a good opportunity. This is also how I take notes in a standard project team meeting, right? I make sure that I have, here's who brought up the idea, here's, you know, the idea that went through, the team signed off on it, right? I want to know who signed off on things, because if I get the question of who agreed to that change, I want to be able to go back and say, well, Ashley, the business owner, agreed to that change, right? Or Adam, the IT lead, agreed to that change. And so documenting things at that level is a good exercise to get into. It's also kind of cool when you come back and see your chapter meeting minutes years later. All right. One more on meeting minutes. So officer reports, president, see meeting materials, SVP, great job on recruitment, or president, on track to meet membership and CMP goals for the semester. Next requirement for chapter of excellence is to raise $1,000 for chapter leadership fund. Senior vice president, please complete recruitment survey. Meaning feedback on. So in the chat, which one do we think is right? A or B? Okay, you guys are too smart for this quiz. Good job. Yes, B is correct. So we want to make sure that all of our meeting minutes, right? Again, it's the same sort of communication pattern. What have we accomplished? What's next? How can we, what is our role, right? Your meeting minutes should be something that if somebody misses a meeting, they could read it and understand what's expected of them as a chapter member, and understand where the chapter's at, right? So I think it's awesome that you guys obviously have such great meeting minutes in your chapters, because you know what's expected and you're holding your VPCOs accountable because you know what's expected. But I will tell you that not every chapter's meeting minutes look that way. Good to set that example, and good to encourage that example to be followed. All right. I do have a meeting minutes template, which I will send, but it sounds like most of you are in a good place. I know we're probably at time. We're 1 minute away from time. This is the last little case study, so I'd like to do it. And if you have questions and you need to run, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and drop your email in the chat, and I will be happy to email you. So this is a member engagement problem. So Joe attends all chapter meetings, events, and ritual. He's always wearing his badge or letters, and he pays his dues early. But he hasn't shown up for committee meetings since the last election. Joe did not run for office. What, if anything, should we do as leaders in the chapter? I don't care if you're an officer or a general member. What should you do? Or what could you do? If you don't think anything needs to be done, what's one new skill you want to develop in Delta Sig for the next 6 months? Does anyone think we should do anything just by a raise of hands? Think we should do something? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, Alex, can I call on you? What do you think we should do?
Well, so first of all, I think it depends on the size of your chapter. I don't think it's, unrealistic to have members for, like, our chapter. We have 150 brothers. A lot of people aren't going to run for office. So I think that kind of depends on the size of your chapter. But at the same time, I think, like, being intentional as executive members and reaching out to this member, understanding where they're at, what their semester looks like, and that kind of thing would be incredibly helpful, and then sort of move on from there.
Awesome. Yeah. So I will tell you, Joe is a real brother. Joe is one of those brothers that, like I said, would be my ideal brother, right? If I were to take my pledge exam. But when the vice president changed out in the transition, the new vice president didn't know that Joe has another organization on a specific date, right? On a specific day, and ended up scheduling on top of that. In addition, the new officer didn't send committee meeting minutes to everybody on the committee. So Joe didn't feel engaged. And even though he really enjoyed being on the finance committee and was a rock star there, he just felt like he wasn't wanted anymore in that space, right? And so the the good news is that the president of the chapter reached out and was like, hey, what's going on? Like, you've been a rock star here for 3 semesters and we miss you. And like, you know, Charlie's uncomfortable that you're not in his committee meetings and he hasn't heard from you. What's going on? And, you know, and Joe took some responsibility that he didn't just tell Charlie like, hey, I have this other organization at this time. But Joe was like, well, this has been known for 3 semesters, right? So there was a little miscommunication, but they cleared it up, and the committee moved their meetings because they wanted Joe to be able to be there, and that worked out. But moral of the story is, like Alex said, we need to know where people are at, right? We have a couple of brothers this semester who, in one of the chapters that I talked to last week, they ended up on trial because they got COVID and they like didn't reach out or tell anybody because they were super embarrassed, but they felt horrible, right? And so after they got their notification, they were like, yeah, I missed a bunch of stuff and that wasn't cool and I'm really sorry, but this is what happened to me, right? And the officers had a decision to make, and they had a discussion to take place. So it's important that we know where our brothers are at, even more so in these virtual times. So definitely, going back to Adam's question earlier about leadership, definitely encourage you to make sure you're keeping in touch with all of your brothers, even when you're in a chapter of 150 in these times. So divide up the group with the executive committee, and everybody email 10 folks every 2 weeks, or 15 folks every 2 weeks, just so that you can keep in touch and make sure that people know you want them around. All right. Any questions? I know that was a lot of material to cover in 90 minutes.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
That's okay. I know that like we take a lot of business classes and we learn how to like engage with the team and make them excited to come to meetings when we're in person. Like we've never actually had a class where they teach us how you engage with teammates online, and you know, moving into a role or even just being a business student, I've been trying to learn like the best ways to engage people on a team per se, not even just in your chapter, but like I have a meeting with my recruitment committee and I'm trying to brainstorm like maybe I have fun slides or I do like an activity. So based off of like all of your experience, how have you been able to like engage your team members and get them still to like just as excited to hop onto Zoom as it would be like a brainstorming session in person?
Yeah, so we do a couple of things. So some people think it's silly, but I keep up with my teams in our Microsoft Teams page, which is kind of equivalent to a lot of chapters Slack, right? But the silly like International Day of X or YZ, right? I'll be like, hey guys, it's International Dog Day. Show me your puppers. And people post their pictures of their dog first thing in the morning. And then I comment on each one of them, right? In some ways, it's kind of like running a social media page. But it just gives people that opportunity to like have those water cooler moments that they don't have right now because we're all virtual and we all have our kids at home and we all have our spouses, and you know, my spouse is amazing, but it's weird sharing an office with him because we both do very different jobs, right? And so as we've gotten accustomed to this new normal, keeping folks engaged has really meant showing that you care about them in a different way. Another thing that I've seen be super successful is chapters, and we've done this in work a couple of times for specific meetings, but it's work, so people show up. Chapters have had great success with choosing a different theme for each of their GBMs. And folks will change their backgrounds, or they'll like wear, like it might be Hawaiian Day, so people would wear, you know, leis and Hawaiian shirts, or the theme might be baby it's cold outside, and everybody like wrapped up in a jacket or their mittens or whatever, and whoever had the best outfit got a shout out and might get like a candy bar dropped to their dorm or whatever. But it was just kind of silly and fun, and people got into it. The other thing that I've seen, and I mentioned this before, is doing that 10 or 15 minute breakout room to play scribble or to do a Kahoot game or to have a quiz, right? Like doing something that you as a chapter would normally do together for a social event and incorporating it into your GBM means that folks might show up for GBM to have that time and to have that levity, and then they stay for the business, right? So University of Maryland, College Park, Gamma Sigma has done an awesome job incorporating that. And they literally just take a chunk of their business meeting because they're like, you know what, this matters. We need to be connecting with each other every week. So we're going to take 15 minutes of our business meeting and do these breakout rooms. I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And
Any
Alexa,
other?
Yeah, hang on, Alexa. You've hit on something that you're going to find in the real world too when you graduate. As Noel can tell you, and I live on Teams now, and it is difficult after a while. You sit there going, I really don't want to go on look on Teams today or have my 87th meeting of the day, right? But so sometimes you got to make it fun somehow.
Yeah, and it really can be as simple as like when our team accomplishes a milestone, I choose a silly GIF and I post it in there with like a, hey guys, way to go. Kudos to X, Y, and Z for being the rock stars last week and pushing us to the finish line. Right. So yeah. But you have to own it and you have to be authentic about it. Like I am that goofy person who uses emojis in like all of my Facebook posts, right? So my posting a GIF, not a big deal. It's very much a Noel thing. Other people write beautiful handwritten thank you notes and mail them to their team members at the end of a milestone. I'm not great at that. I do that at the end of projects though. So any other questions? Okay, well, thank you guys so much for being such a fabulous audience. As I mentioned a couple of times, I'm always open to feedback. So if there's something that you liked about this presentation and I should keep, if there's something that you didn't like and I should take out, if there's something that you would have loved to have seen, please drop me a text or an email and let me know that. Otherwise, always looking to support brothers. So if you need anything in the future, if you'd like to have me come present to your chapter on project management or diversity or a different topic of your choosing, give me a shout. I would love to help you out.
Well, on behalf of Cincinnati Alumni Chapter, we most certainly will. This has been, I hope everyone else was as thrilled as I am. This has been amazing. And I hope it's something that you guys can take and use, because at some point, you're going to be needing to have these skills. So again, this is where research and practice intersect. So let's take advantage of the knowledge that we have. So just again, to put in a plug for Cincinnati Alumni Chapter, please join our Facebook group and keep up with us. We have an exciting bunch of professional events coming up in the spring. And again, we're looking forward to partnering with every chapter in our region. So it'd be a great opportunity for all of us to get to know each other and get to do some things collaboratively. And the last thing I will mention for all of the Alpha Upsilons on this is be sure to check out the video that we did for Founders Day at the central office. Alex is on it, as well as Jim Gerhardt and James Kuhn and myself, but there's a bunch more. So please, yes, please check that out. So again, Noel, we cannot thank you enough. This has been absolutely fabulous. And again, on behalf of Cincinnati Alumni Chapter, thanks so much for this. So.
Thank you for the opportunity. This has been a true joy. So thanks,
Great. Everyone. Absolutely. So with that, we'll end this. Have a fabulous break, everyone, and we'll see you in the spring. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Take care.